We're hours away from the start of the Australian Grand Prix, our third Grand Prix of the year, and we have all the upgrades / improvements that teams have brought. Now this Grand Prix doesn't usually bring too much stuff because of the distance, the time change, and just the inconvenience of bringing parts. But let's go over all the parts that they have brought to this Grand Prix and what it has done for every single team. There are some other unique things to go over as well. Before getting into it, just wanted to thank you guys for support on the channel. It's been doing amazing, and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting the channel like you do. Whether you're a member, a viewer, thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're new here, I'd love if you'd subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. Let's get into the upgrades video. First upgrade I wanted to go over is the Zhou Guanyu helmet. I mean, this is just super cool. I know it's not a car specific upgrade, but the actual helmet itself just looks cool, and I love the way these guys interact with each other. I hope their team does much better. They do have an upgrade that's actually brought here, but in general, the two of them as a pairing is pretty cool, and it's a very cool helmet design. I think it's unique and a good play on helmet designs in general, especially coming from Zhou. Now let's start off with the rear wings, as I usually do. And we start off with the biggest teams, which is Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. And these rear wings are different to that of Jeddah. Now, some of them are going to be pretty similar. We're going to see the same rear wings from Bahrain or Jeddah. Now for Red Bull's case, they've gone for medium-high downforce. They probably have the highest downforce wing coming here, which will probably give them a good advantage in Sector 1, and they already have a good straight line speed through Sector 2 and 3. So it makes sense that they optimize for that Sector 1. It's crazy how much more you can see the side pod inlet from this angle, but that is a very high downforce wing. Now Ferrari's a tricky one here. They said they're bringing an upgrade here to Australia, and that rear wing has been shown previously in testing, but not actually at the Grand Prix just yet. They do have some other changes that I'm going to go over shortly with the Ferrari, but the rear wing that's currently mounted is the same one they used in both Bahrain and in Jeddah. It's not a low downforce one, it's just straight up medium downforce. Now the same goes for McLaren. They use the exact same rear wing in Jeddah. It's the exact same one. It's got that small little divot in the middle that was pretty unique to itself. And the actual cutouts itself are also different on this rear wing in comparison to its Bahrain one. So it's more low downforce. This track shouldn't really highlight as much how much drag they genuinely have on that car, but it's still going to be an issue ongoing within the season. And the supposed upgrades they were supposed to bring to this Grand Prix are now delayed all the way up until May. So that's a pretty interesting sign from McLaren. Mercedes have the same rear wing as they did in Bahrain, and they used it in a practice in Jeddah, but overall it wasn't fast enough. I wonder if they're going to change back to the other one. They're doing a lot of tests. We're going to go over those tests because there are certain parts that have been rumored to kind of have came to the car, went off of it. We'll go over it pretty soon with Mercedes. It's a bit of a iffy situation for them, and this weekend's going to be very experimental from what we're hearing. Now looking at Aston Martin, Williams, Alpine, and Racing Bulls. The highest downforce actually comes from the top, and then it goes to lower downforce. Aston Martin's got a medium-high, pretty close to that of Red Bull. Their straight line speed has been pretty good. Their downforce has also been pretty good, and it's pretty interesting to go here. They do have an upgrade actually somewhere on the car that I will talk about that will actually reduce some drag, so it's possible they do go with this rear wing setup. They have something very similar to the Red Bull that I just actually noticed as well. On that rear wing end plate cutout, that's actually something that Red Bull introduced last year in Singapore, and no other team has really been kind of implementing that as much as the Aston Martin just recently did. That is a new thing with this rear wing that is on that car. Williams also has a medium downforce. I wouldn't say medium high, pretty medium-ish, but pretty high for the Williams itself to bring something like this at a track like this. But they were very successful last year, and I think this year they're going to be pretty successful as well. The Alpine car has brought a medium-low downforce. This car is really iffy to tell if it's got any straight line speed or not. It's just really unstable in corners, and I think that's their biggest issue. And the Racing Bulls actually kind of lacks the same thing. Their straight line speed is pretty good, and they've been going with these lower downforce wings, but overall the car has been very imbalanced, and it just has not been performing to the standard that we were holding it at in the beginning of the season. Last two rear wings, and we got a low downforce for Haas, and we got a medium downforce for Sauber. Sauber is one of the only teams that brought a significant, I guess you can say, upgrade here, so we're going to go a little bit more over Sauber in a little bit as well. Now, as I said for Ferrari, looking here at a better picture of this rear wing, You can also tell another thing. You can see that their beam wing setup is the one that they used in Jeddah. They have two beam wing setups. They have one with that double beam wing setup, or the one with the one beam wing that was pretty much introduced by Red Bull that gave that crazy DRS effect that most teams have been picking up on and using. Same thing they used in Jeddah. And I do think the rear wing could possibly be changed. They realized that they had a lot more performance than they did. I'll put that rear wing on the screen that has been shown and what we're supposing it's going to look like to give them a more lower downforce setup. They actually had the best tire wear in Jeddah. I mentioned this before and you guys didn't really believe me, but yes, actually in Jeddah. Now, putting in a couple more variables, the Red Bull did have to go through some lapped cars, but so did Leclerc at the very end as well. They had the best, technically, tire wear. Were they the best in race pace? No. But in tire wear, they were the best. They also did have a medium downforce and the Red Bull had a low downforce. So let's see if they take that compromise, if it's good enough for them to stick with the medium or go with that low downforce wing. Ferrari is still trying a few things. Their next real upgrade is going to come in the next Grand Prix. And then they have a major upgrade coming in Imola, which a lot of teams really do. Now let's look at the Mercedes cars. So Mercedes, looking at it right here, you can see that their cooling outlet is actually pretty big. Cooling here will also be important. From the looks of it on the weather reports, it shouldn't be as big as it was, I think, in Jeddah and Bahrain, especially if some rain is going to be implemented into the weekend. It's not going to be a race that's going to have a lot of weather conditions. It's going to be a dry one. So we should expect the cooling to be pretty minimal on teams. Aston has no cooling, but this is what we should expect from Mercedes. Now, something that's been rumored this whole entire week is that the floor design was changed in Bahrain from testing. It was being reported that they tested a floor, and then going into the Bahrain weekend, they switched to a different floor that was supposed to be their floor for the start of the season. Now, if you look at this floor and you look at their starting floor, it's the same. So I'm not sure where people are getting this idea that Mercedes changed their floor and this is going to be an upgrade that they're introducing, and this is their experimental weekend going from that floor that they had at the beginning of the season to a floor that they have currently right now. It's not. It's the same piece that they've had both in testing and right now, and I think the real experiments are going to go into how they're setting up the car, which has been a continuous ongoing problem. I saw somewhere recently that James Allison said that the rear suspension is giving them problems. I also saw somewhere a rumor that supposedly their simulator is 1 second off from what their actual pace of their car is. If that's actually true, they have such a bad problem. I mean, that is a ridiculous pace difference in the simulator if it's a whole entire second. Now, do I really believe these reports? Not really sure. I don't think that people are that much into it to know exactly the seconds and why Mercedes would say that. A second off means that they would literally be in front of Red Bull. So I don't see this car being in front of Red Bull. Now, Aston Martin, they have brought something. Now, looking at it here, bringing them out of the pit garage, that is the same front wing, but they have brought a upgraded front wing here to the Australian Grand Prix. Here is a picture of the old front wing. Well, it's going to be a wing that we see continuously throughout the season, but as we scroll right, we see a more lower downforce rear wing. We see a more lower downforce front wing. We see that they have that little gurney flap on the very top upper flap, but they have reduced the way that the second and third upper flap are elevated on that front wing to give it a little bit more low downforce. Now, this isn't a significant upgrade, but it could add them some performance and it could give them some straight line speed. If they do choose to go with the rear wing with more medium high downforce, this is probably the optimal setup for the car. Now, if they change back to that lower downforce rear wing they had in Jeddah, they could keep this same front wing that they had from the last race. So it's going to be a compromise that they're going to make, not a significant upgrade, but one to note. Sauber has brought a new front wing, and looking at it right here, gives you a perfect look at it. They brought something pretty closely to that of the Mercedes when it comes to that inner part of the front wing and that top upper flap. It is very skinny. It's not as skinny or even close to the Mercedes, but it kind of has that same idea. They also have this metal part towards the nose that's holding that wing together and either reduces or increases the flexing in certain parts of this front wing. They've brought that. Red Bull has it in that exact same position, and funny enough, that came originally from the AMR 22. The AMR 22 had it set up there, so copying a little bit of Red Bull, using a little bit of that experience that Red Bull has. But that is all that we have for Australia. This isn't a big weekend when it comes to upgrades. It never will be because of the location and kind of how it's implemented into our race year. But in Japan, and soon enough, we're going to get some huge game-changing updates. So right now, this is your update for the weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.